You are listening to the BU Podcast with Michael Arrington. We discuss social justice, childhood trauma, current events, hip-hop, and so much more. Now, here's your host, Michael Arrington.
Couples have issues with intimacy, and a lot of it is really boils down to their definition of what intimacy is. There's several types of different types of intimacy, and that's why my guest today, Jordan Donnell, she'll get into a couple of those things, man. But a lot of times couples have different evaluations of what intimacy is, and some of it is fantasy, some of it is based off porn, some of it is based off of religious moral codes, some of it is societal, and it's kind of an ever-changing thing. I think it's important that couples realize, what their boundaries and limits are, but also to explore and, stay within your comfort zone, but explore new things and try new things. In long-term relationships, these things kind of, things get stale. Anything gets stale. Communication gets stale. How you interact gets stale. So all those things are ever changing, and you need to be aware of those things that you want to explore, and in order for things to remain viable in any relationship. But intimacy seems to be the biggest thing, and so we tackle some of those things with my guest today, and hopefully it gives you some insight on things you may do or things you may see, or maybe even changing your perspectives of what intimacy looks like, what sex is. It's more than just penetration. It's a lot of things that go into it. It's all encompassing, and this show will be interesting, man, to say the least. It's very, very informative. So I hope you tune in, check it out. This is Mike Arrington, BU Podcast. We'll be right back.
You are listening to the BU Podcast with Michael Arrington.
All right, we are back, the BU Podcast. Mike Arrington, I am here with the lovely Jordan Donnell. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm good, man. I'm really, really good. So just want to ask you a few questions, get into some things. I really a big fan of your IG page and the education that you give women and people in general. So start it off real quick. So just give me some background on who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I am Jordan Donnell. I am a physician assistant, a women's sexual health educator, and intimacy coach. I am also the founder of the Vaginas, Vulvas, and Vibrators podcast. I'm on the board for Something Positive for Positive People, which is a nonprofit company all about raising awareness for herpes and mental health diagnoses associated to the herpes diagnosis. And I started this journey probably when I was a teenager, and really got into it after going on my own personal sexploration, you could call it, and learning about myself and discovering some things that led me here.
What is, to you anyway, what is sex in its simplest form?
Ooh, that is such a good question. Sex in the simplest form, I think, is anything that is involving intimacy and connection. It can be partnered, it can be solo, it can be penetrative or non-penetrative, and it really encompasses so many forms of pleasure and intimacy.
Okay. So what was the motivation for you to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to educate other women? Was it your own personal experience that got you there, or what was it?
So it was more of my medical experience in really discovering that so many women did not know about different medical conditions that could potentially affect them, or, really understanding their bodies. But while I started that journey, I had my own personal experiences that shaped where I took my coaching and my business, that led to talking a little bit more about the intimacy side than just the health side.
Okay, dope. I know you mentioned earlier, you said something about sex is kind of more than just penetration. So what are some of the ideologies behind that?
Yeah, I think so many times we're taught that sex is penetration and it ends when the male ejaculates. And that is not true. If you ask a heterosexual female couple a homosexual female couple how they have sex, they say, we have sex. And
Right.
ultimately, we just have this narrow mindset that it only involves vagina, penis penetration, but really it encompasses so much more than just that. It is everything from oral sex, anal sex, manual stimulation. It can even be toy play, manual stimulation of yourself. It could just be really cuddling and building that intimacy. Like that is all forms of sex, kissing, all of that.
Right, because I always feel like, as a therapist, as a couples therapist, I've talked to couples, and you know, it's one of those things where what would you allow your partner to do with someone else if you felt like it wasn't, if it's crossing the boundary or crossing the line, right? So you wouldn't allow most couples wouldn't allow their mate to cuddle with another person because they would consider that intimacy, right? That's kind of breaking the myth. So that's really important in that you said that. So um inner course and outer course, explain those things.
Yes. So some of you might have heard the term foreplay before, and foreplay is kind of being retermed into outer course. And basically, it's everything that is not involving penetration. And in a sexual experience can be only outer course. It doesn't need to involve penetration, and it can still be a wonderful experience. So what that really looks like is that that's everything leading up to um, the sex act, so to speak. And it's the kissing, it's the foreplay, it's the arousal, the desire, building all of that beforehand.
Right. Yeah, because like in my own experiences, there's been like, situations where just that closeness of being intimate and touching in certain places, maybe you're in public, so you can't fully get busy like you like, but in those moments of that level of intimacy is kind of, it's important, especially for couples. What is the importance of masturbation, both physically and mentally and even emotionally?
Yes, masturbation is so powerful because it really allows you to discover yourself and discover your bodies and learn what you want so that you can articulate that to a partner potentially. It has benefits as far as better sleep, pain reduction. Let's see, mental health. It has a huge benefit. You have a release of dopamine, serotonin, all of these hormones. So, from a mental health standpoint, that also benefits. And masturbation is really fun on top of that.
Right. Okay, so let's get into the myths of porn, and let's say ethical porn, which is something I've recently discovered in dealing with couples. It's a lot about ethical porn. So explain those things.
Yes, I love that you brought this up. I recently went viral on Instagram for my reel about ethical porn, and it created a lot of conversation. And I had done a podcast episode with Lotus Lane. She is a adult star who kind of shared with me a little bit more about what ethical porn is, but ultimately you have to define what ethical means for you as an individual. And for some people, ethical means no porn at all. For other people, it's that the actors' needs are being met. They're being fed, they're being hydrated, accurate or appropriate work hours. They're not working 30 hours straight. and really being taken care of rather than a situation where they're being taken advantage of. Also, consensual, that's a huge part of it as well, within the entire porn industry, but especially ethical porn, making sure that consent is involved as well.
Hey, I don't know, like for even in dealing with some of the high school kids that I deal with on a clinical basis, they kind of reverence porn as, the end all be all, because that's kind of their first introduction to what they would consider sex. And how detrimental, if any, would that you think that is for somebody just beginning their sexual experiences?
Yeah, I think that, unfortunately, a lot of teenagers learn what sex is through porn, and porn is not an accurate depiction of what sex is. And there's a lot of different types of porn out there. So it really depends on what your teen is stumbling into. But, if there's some different role plays where it might be a little bit more aggressive or violent, and then kids are learning that this is, quote, how sex is supposed to be, when really that's not the case. And so depending on what they're finding, it can have an impact on what they think sex should be like. I think it also comes into play when you look at penis size or vulva shapes and colors and things, and that you see this porn star appearance, but that's not actual reality either. And then starting that comparison at a young age where, I don't look like they do. Am I normal? And things
Right.
like that start setting in.
Yeah, you get like I can't perform that long, or there's performance anxiety and those types of things. And like you said, size and shape and, and ejaculation and all those things that go into it. Like it gets so fantasized and romanticized. If there's no context to that as a youth, you think it is what it is, and you take it for reality. With that, let me ask you about like sex myths as they come from like religious aspects, societal aspects, and how do people like in your field, in your position, kind of break those myths down?
Yeah. Like one of the biggest myths is that if you have more sexual partners as a female, then you are, quote, loose, or your vagina is no longer tight, which a partner cannot tell how many partners you have had based on anything. They don't know. And I think that's one of the biggest myths that are out there. Do you have any in mind that you're wanting me to talk about?
I know specifically there's religious myths, as you mentioned, kind of that double standard where a woman can only have but so many partners, where a man can have as many as they want. And I know that kind of comes from a kind of a sexist standpoint, but that certain sex acts are dirty, right? Like, oh, I can't do oral because that's against either my religious or my moral or societal beliefs. So how do you break that down? I know a lot of your Instagram is about awareness and sexual confidence. Do you run in that a lot? And then how do you kind of deal with those clients that have that ideology?
Yeah, I don't run into a lot of my clientele, for the most part, doesn't come from a strong religious background. So I don't run into a lot of religious barriers. However, that being said, there are so many things out there. I mean, you can look at our education system is based on abstinence, which is religion based.
Right.
And, what happens is that really fails the children in particular, because they're not able to get accurate information about what really happens. When it comes to like different sex acts, let me think here. I think one of the biggest things is just having conversations and having open conversations with people around you. And that can really help normalize the topics, because we all have a little bit different personal backgrounds and histories. And the more you talk about it, the more you have the opportunity to learn. But then we're also destigmatizing things the more we talk about them as well.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I was born in the 70s, mid 70s to be exact.